Sasha Bru and Anne Tomic, in their analysis of historical avant-garde, especially futurism, dadaism, and constructivism, highlight the café-concert, cabaret, théâtre de variété, music hall. In all of this, there is a striving for the integration of several artistic fields. It is an expression of a deep spiritual need, not just a spectacularly attractive manifestation. Total art expresses the synthesis of all the senses. They make us feel the atmosphere of a place. This is how new forms of theater performances have emerged. It is a living art in which we feel a certain atmosphere only if we are directly present in a space. Given the role of atmosphere in space, it is no coincidence that thinking about atmosphere has become particularly widespread in architecture, but also in theater. In theater, the emphasis can be on everything: the set design, the lighting, the sound, the tone of the words and music, the movement, the role of the body. Often the discussion continues towards the participation of the audience as co-participants. The notion of atmosphere is historically linked to the related notions of the luminous, aura, ambient, genius, loci, spirit of place, etc. I was interested in how to create new works of art as an immersive experience. I see in the notion of atmosphere a particular sensitive approach that comes from the body as one feels in a space. I'm attracted to the ability of a person to subliminally, instantly feel the atmosphere in a space. How space affects people and how people affect space. Theater, dance, performance art could be paradigmatic here. Avant-garde theater paved the way for contemporary art, which can no longer be imagined without the striving for multisensory and multi-artistic approaches. We can also see the contribution of avant-garde theater as having transcended the dualism of body and mind, as having transcended an artistic world based only on the reception of words and intellectual argumentation. By leaning on Nietzsche's Dionysm, from German Expressionism onwards, it gave us a modern sense of corporeality. It was an avant-garde in the placement of the body on the stage. The notion of atmosphere in the theater raises the question of how to prepare the theater audience to not only understand the theatrical vision, but also to feel it. Richard Kearney writes that what distinguishes art from documentary records and historiography is how much pathos it managed to evoke in its receiver. The notion of pathos, of feeling, is important, but they do not exist without the body feeling them in a certain space. Now I will present the history of atmosphere and its definitions. Atmosphere implies a certain affective quality of lived and non-geometrical space. An atmosphere is an emotional space that involves one's body conceived of more as felt than as physical one. Accordingly, the body that plays a key role in atmospheric approach is not the body that we see in the mirror, but the one we feel, in whose atmospheric resonances we can describe only from our first-person perspective. Turning now to the arts, the atmospheric approach seems especially useful for contemporary art, inviting the spectator to a poetic, immersive experience of its works, which at times can be even touched, taped, scratched on the surface, etc. And it is the theater, at least since Mikhail Chekhov's reflections in 1953 about the atmospheric link between stage and audience, that has long been the best model for an aesthetics of atmosphere. Atmosphere usually means a feeling, relaxed, oppressive, etc., that is not private and internal, but poured into the perceiver's corporeal space, which influences his attitude, behavior, and even thought. Feeling is not something that I possess because, if anything, it is the feeling that possesses me. Thus, instead of I'm sad, it would be better to say sadness overwhelmed me. Marco Tedeschini and Tonino Grifero in 2010 think that this first philosophical concept of atmosphere means that it emotionally involves our lived body, and thus it provides a possible response to the issue of our involvement in the world we live in, but in the opposite way, as encompassing us. However, only in the last decades has atmosphere become a philosophical scientific theme, precisely since when Hermann Schmidt's neo-phenomenological use of atmospheric feelings in opposition to dualism of Cartesian began to be recognized as worth of research. According to Schmidt in 1969, neither the person concerned by an atmosphere nor the object on which it centers can generate the atmosphere. Such relations are contingent. One gets into an atmosphere which has no origin. This means that atmospheres do not ontologically or logically depend on any other being that either produces or founds them. All pure moods, excitements, and centered emotions therefore contribute to shape and form the surroundings of the person concerned and actually involve them, not as if they were an entity in such environment, but rather as special element of this environment. To sum up, Schmidt's atmospheres seem to be special. This means that they make a space emotionally surround the things and the living beings within. In the 1990s, a soft but much more internationally influential version of this anti-projectivist conception of atmospheric feelings and their felt bodily resonance was provided by philosopher Gernot Böhme. He places atmosphere at the center first of an ecological aesthetics and then of a new aesthetics now understood as a general theory of affective and involving perception. Unlike Schmidt's, Böhme places staging atmospheres at the center of an aesthetic work. In his book on atmospheres and space, Böhme in 2017 defines an atmosphere as tuned space, a space with a certain mood. This means, as he then adds, that atmospheres are always something special and emotional. For Gernot Böhme, atmosphere is the common reality of the perceiver and the perceived. It is the reality of the perceived as the sphere of its presence and the reality of the perceiver, insofar as in sensing the atmosphere, she or he is bodily present in a certain way. This synthetic function of atmosphere is at the same time the legitimation of the particular forms of speech in which an evening is called, for example, melancholic or a garden beautiful. According to Böhme, an atmosphere is a medium. It mediates objective factors of the environment with the aesthetic feelings of human being. He describes the atmosphere as a common reality or a synthetic function in order to stress the fact that there is no third entity between perceiver and perceived, but something in between. The former and the later are entities per se, that is, autonomously existent, whereas an atmosphere appears if and only if the two poles of perception are co-present. One may conclude that atmospheres are the effect of the real relationship between a subject and an object, where effect means that atmospheres proceed from or are created by this encounter. From the perspective of the object, therefore, the atmosphere is the sphere of its perceptible presence. Only from the perspective of the subject is atmosphere perceived as the emotional response to the presence of something or someone. Aesthetics thus becomes the study of the relations between ambient qualities and states of mind. According to Böhme's view, the concept of atmosphere solves the subject-object dichotomy and gives a new shape to aesthetics itself. Traditional aesthetics explains such statements as metaphorical and refers them to one's mental states, make it something entirely subjective and independent from the object. And in fact, this is what happens when we regard the melancholy or beauty of Wally or an evening as projections, that is, as the projections of moods understood as internal psychic states. Aesthetics takes a new shape as the theory of perception, where perception no longer means only information processing or recognition of situation, but includes the affective impact of the observed. But aesthetics becomes able also to respond to the so-called aesthetization of our life world. The fact that our reality is more and more a matter of staging, that is, a production of atmospheres. According to Böhme, one may predict that as atmospheric effect that a certain thing or environment or artwork will have on someone is our vision in aesthetics. Schmidt and Böhme diverge the most exactly on this issue. Schmidt does not admit any creation of atmospheres, while Böhme is convinced that it is possible. This contrast is due to some theoretical differences in their conception of what an atmosphere is, as Schmitz thinks that atmospheres are founded neither on the object they may refer to, nor on the subject that perceives them. Accordingly, for him, atmospheres are spatial and emotional entities that encompass us in such a way that we can't predict them. At the opposite side, Gernot Behmer thinks that atmospheres depend both on the subject and on the object, also in the sense of an artwork. Atmospheres are discussed today also in interior design, urban planning, advertising, and all areas related to scenography. For example, the background composition in broadcasting, film, and television. Generally, atmospheres appear wherever something is staged, and today that means almost everywhere. Further, atmospheres are like the aesthetic quality of a scene. The art of the stage set has, of course, long transcended mere scenography. Wagner's operas seem to have provided a special occasion for this because they required, on the one hand, a fantastic ambience, and on the other, they were particularly intended to affect feelings and not only the faculty of imagination. To conclude, a kind of stage art began to evolve that is no longer limited to designing the stage area, but is capable, on the one hand, of making the stage and the events on it appear in a special light, and on the other, creating an acoustic space that tunes the whole. With that, the possibility arose for scenography to leave the stage area and spread into space in general. These luminous and sonic spaces are no longer perceived from a distance, but experienced immersively. Further, the current dominance of light and sound design allows us retrospectively to recognize more precisely what the making of atmospheres consists of. Clearly, that it is not really about views as the old type of scenography still had, but much more about the making of emotional spaces, that is, atmospheres, and not of geometrical space. Or better, what matters is not the determinations of things and, like in theater, human bodies, but their emanations into space and how we feel them.